Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. On the other hand, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Hare Ram. No, no, we didn't. No, we don't see that from the beginning of philosophy. No, no. Who? Yeah. But you may also notice that Epicurus was not the supreme, absolute spokesperson for philosophy. Were some people skeptics? Yes. Did they control philosophy? No. Do you want to sit up here in the front?
I can't in front of me.
Okay. Here we are in the material creation, and we are in a disciplined, guided way enacting the activities and relationships of the spiritual world, which is our real home. So, ISKCON, or in general bona fide Vaishnava societies, the whole purpose is to train and prepare people to go back into free life. It's like, for example, when people are in prison and then they're released, there's a relatively high rate of recidivism, which is a social science term, means they ended up going back to jail. People are in jail and then they get out and then they again commit some crime and go back to jail. BT, what's that?
I'm sending Shanti days, so don't forget.
Oh. So this is from Krishna's point of view. From Krishna's point of view, here we are down here. His spirit, his eternal spiritual children. Krishna says, you're actually part of me. For an intimate relationship, so we're part of Krishna. And if you think about it, if you have two people who are just separate people, and they can have a relationship, and the relationship may be an intimate one, but they're still two individuals. In the case of Krishna, he says in Bhagavad Gita that Mamaivangsa Jivaloke, you're actually part of me. You're actually part of me. And Mama Eva, the word Eva there, Mama Eva, which becomes Mamaivangsa Jivaloke, Angsha's part, is literally you are indeed part of me, or you're part of me alone. It's an emphatic word, Eva, which means only that, or just so, and so Krishna says, Mama Eva, you are part of me alone. Because we think we're part of a society or community or family or country or whatever, corporation. And then Krishna says, you are actually part of me alone. You are just part of me. Mamaiv angsa jiva loke, in this world of life. Jiva loke. Jiva bhuta sanatana, the eternal living being. Jiva bhuta, living being. So, from Krishna's point of view, he comes to this world. Krishna comes to this world to teach and to restore Dharma, because there's a whole cosmic system of Dharma It's actually not just an earthly system. The whole universe has laws. It's law-driven, rule-driven. Even science assumes, isn't it, there are certain uniform laws of nature throughout the universe. So that's Dharma, ultimately. Dharma, ultimately, means that the universe runs by laws and principles, and when we follow those principles, ultimately we graduate. It's like if you're in a school, if you go to the classes and write the papers and take the tests, then you graduate. And so the whole system of Dharma is arranged so that it's interesting, because you think about it, whatever kind of Dharma you have, because there's Dharma corresponding to all the Varnas and Ashrams, so that there's Kshatriya Dharma, there's Brahma Dharma, the Dharma for Brahmins or Vaishyas or Sudras, there's Grihastha Dharma, there's Sannyasi Dharma, Brahmachari Dharma, Vanaprastha Dharma. There's all these Dharmas, and then there's... So the Dharma simultaneously engages your nature, it accepts you as you are. Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita 333, sorry, it's 333. Bhagavad Gita 333, Krishna says, Sadrasham cheshtate swasya prakritir jnanavanapi. It's a very interesting verse. That jnanavanapi, even an enlightened person, even a person that has knowledge. Because the word jnanavan, one who has knowledge, same word Krishna uses at 19? Bahunam janmanamante jnanavan mam prapadyate. After many births, one who has knowledge surrenders to me. So the word jnanavan, like Bhagavan, van means one who possesses jnana, jnanavan, is, it's a big word. After many births, one who is jnanavan surrenders to me. So Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, but even if you are a jnanavan, even if you do have real knowledge, which elsewhere in the Gita, real knowledge is defined as understanding soul, nature, and God, those three fundamental aspects of reality. So even if you have knowledge, still you will act sadrashang, according to swasya prakritir, your own nature. Your own nature. So I remember when I was young, the early days of the movement, because everyone lived in ashrams, there was this idea that to be really surrendered to Krishna, if you were sincere, you would sort of denature yourself. You would, to even have a nature, to even have propensities was a lack of sincerity. It's like, no, just be a servant. Somehow you should just surrender to Krishna, meaning that you don't have a nature. You just do whatever Krishna wants you to do.
Or the temple president wanted you to do.
Yeah, well, he's Krishna's bona fide representative. So, but Krishna says, even a jnanavan acts according to his own nature. And then Krishna says, nigraha, that he states a general principle, prakriting janti bhutani, creatures follow their nature. And the word prakriti in Sanskrit is just like English. Like the word nature can mean birds and trees, or it can mean the way you are, your characteristics, your character, your nature. It's exactly the same in Sanskrit. So Krishna says, prakriting yanti. Yanti means they go to. Bhutani. Bhutani, creatures go to their nature. They follow their nature. Nigraha. Graha in Sanskrit is, we have in English also. Graha is just grasp, grab, or to take. That's Sanskrit grah. Or there's grub, not food, not cowboy food, but grub is grabh is an ancient Sanskrit verb meaning the same as grah, to take, to grasp, to grab. And ni means down, so to take down means to repress. So nigraha, repression. What will repression do? Nigraha kinkarishati, what will it do? So, it's very interesting because in doing your duty, which is born of your nature, Krishna says again and again, in chapter 18 of the Gita, Krishna reviews the Varna system. in chapter 4, Krishna says, Chatur Varnya Mayasristam, I've created the system for Varnas. And then in chapter 18, Krishna actually gives the characteristics of each Varna. And it's very interesting because after giving the characteristics of each Varna, he says that Swabhavaja, that these duties or this of this Varna are born of one's, or the duty for this Varna is born of one's nature. So it's your nature that defines your duty. It's not that you have to twist your nature so that it fits what someone thinks is your duty. It is your nature, it is your own nature, which determines what your duty is. And Krishna says that over and over and over again. So let's say you're doing your duty according to your nature. Whatever your nature is, you're doing your duty. You have a particular service or vocation, career for Krishna. So you do your duty, and yet at the same time, you're given that facility to follow your nature, to be yourself, but at the same time, you have to perform that duty in a spirit of devotion or of offering the fruit to Krishna. And so it's like when you're working out in a gym, if you're doing exercise at home. You want to stretch, you want to push yourself a little bit, not too much. If you don't push yourself at all, you might as well not even do it because you're not helping yourself. So you have to push yourself a little bit, but not too much. And so that's what really Krishna is given. Krishna is the supreme personality, a personal trainer. And so he's created this system where he says, yeah, your duty is born of your nature. Be yourself. At the same time, right now, it may be your nature to be selfish. It may be your nature to work for yourself, like to be proud, to want to enjoy what you're doing. So on that point, stretch a little bit spiritually. Do it for me. So it's really a combination of doing what's natural for you, but at the same time overcoming sort of an artificially and pervertedly natural thing we have now of being selfish or of working for ourselves. And so Krishna simultaneously creates a universe for us so we can play out all of our fantasies of being the enjoyer. And it gives us a chance to, run with that. Okay, go ahead, fantasize. And even by the laws of karma, we can sort of like custom order our next body. If you want a particular body, like say someone wanted a demigod body or this or that body, but that's okay. You can, it's like if you want certain clothes, they just cost a certain amount of money. If you have the money, you can buy the clothes. And so if you want a certain kind of body, you just got to pay the price. You have to. And so Krishna gives us a chance to sort of carry out all of our sort of perverse fantasies of being the enjoyers of this world. Of being the enjoyers of this world in so many ways. And then at the end, and yet simultaneously, because you're doing it for Krishna, he says, do what's natural for you, do it for me. And so in the act of doing it for Krishna, we're becoming purified, and we start to realize that actually I don't want to be selfish. It's very lonely to be selfish. Because the more selfish we are, the more we really cut ourselves off from other people. Because when I'm selfish, I'm self-centered. And I see other people just kind of revolving around me. But those aren't real people, because real people don't revolve around me. My fictitious debasement of them, it's like, in other words, because everyone here, the same thing we were talking about, everyone here is the center of their own life, in a sense. Everyone here is a subject in the center of their own life. And so when I see you or someone else as somehow that I should be the center of your life, you only exist to appreciate me, or to buy products and services from me, or some people think that you exist only to give me sexual satisfaction, which is, getting pretty low and grimy. And so when we see people that way, we're demeaning them, we're debasing them, And therefore, we're not associating with real people, with complete people. We just have these truncated or these like diminished, perverted ideas of other people, namely that they're just objects of my satisfaction, and therefore, ultimately, you're not really associating with real people. And as long as it works, as long as you can somehow or other convince other people or convince yourself that other people are somehow gratifying you, you may think it's nice, but then inevitably one day you wake up and realize that no one really loves me, because, who loves to be exploited? So therefore, the result of selfishness is, number one, no one really loves you. And sooner or later you realize that no one really loves me, and then there's all this loneliness because I rejected the idea of having relationships with real, complete people. Because real, complete people are not just objects of my gratification. Real, complete people are the centers of their own lives. And so ultimately selfishness is very lonely. And of course the way to overcome selfishness is try the real world. Because in the real world, everyone is the center of their own life. And also when we're proud or vain, it's like there's only so much room on your hard drive. So if you take up all your hard drive with garbage, rubbish, I think the English word. So if we take up all our hard drive with all kinds of stuff, then even if there's some file you really want, just some type of file that you would really like to have, there's no room for it. And so if our mind is completely filled with our own self-centeredness, there's no room for the real world. Because in fact, none of us is the center of the real world. Actually, for an ISKCON GBC and Guru, that can be a devastating realization. But I'm not talking about other GBCs and Gurus. That was self-inflicted. I'm joking about myself. I'm not making fun of anyone else. That was just laughing at myself. So, please believe me. So when the payoff, the reward for being a little more humble is you actually get to live in the real world with real people. And then when we that's why attachment, like, the boy-girl thing, you've heard of that. That attachment, what it does is, because, all of us are old enough to know something about that, right? I don't think any of us are absolute, like innocent as a newborn babe, as they say. So the nature of attachment, as we've all experienced it, is that, in a sense, we're becoming attached to an idea of ourselves, what we think we are to the other person. Like, it's just like if you know that someone really finds you attractive, that can be seductive. Like that person really thinks you're beautiful, or that person is really falling for you. And so that can itself attract us, because we're being attracted to the idea of being the most important person in someone else's life. And that's a trap. It's kind of necessary for a marriage to work. Obviously, if you marry a man, he can't think some other woman is more important in his life. Maybe his mother, if he's Italian. But the idea here is that, or Indian. But the idea is, it's a trap, because we should want Krishna to be the most important person in everyone's life. We should want Krishna to be the most important. And so that's, you've probably heard those things like, give your whatever's most valuable to you, give it to Krishna. So let's say I'm attached to someone, and I'm attached to being very important to that person. Am I comfortable with the idea that Krishna is actually most important to that person? It's easier to be comfortable with the idea if, in the name of Krishna consciousness, the other person doesn't treat us in some stupid, neglectful way. But still, I mean, in our minds, we should really love Krishna so much that we want Krishna to be the most important person in everyone's life. And therefore, whether it's a marriage relationship, whether it's friendship, whether it's parents and children, maybe it's someone we meet, maybe our students, maybe our teacher, to anyone, in all the many different kinds of relationships, if we really want Krishna to be the most important person in that person's life, then we're free. It's like you're free to love, and you're free to care, and you're free to be loved. And yet there's no entanglement, because I actually simply want that this person love Krishna. I mean, if you think about it, when people are falling in love, and having, grown up as a teenager in California, I know all about that. So, anyway, so it's like when you're becoming attached to someone, it's like whatever you see that's nice, it's a movie or a book or anything that's nice, you want to share it with that person. It's just the nature of attachment. When you're attached to someone, anything which you enjoy, you can't fully enjoy unless you share it with that person. Like if I really want to see a movie, but I want to go with that person. I mean, it's just the nature. That's the nature of attachment, and so. So Krishna is most valuable, and really seeing Krishna as the most important person, and Govindam Adi Purusham, the original person. Really seeing Krishna as a Purushottam. Jo mam eva masamudho janati Purushottamam. Krishna says, one who thus knows me without any confusion. That's what the word means, literally. Asamudho, without any confusion. One who knows me as the most important person. In every relationship. Because that's what sense gratification is. It means in this little corner of my life, whether it's someone that's addicted to pornography, whether it's someone who's attached to another person, whether it's someone who just, anything, it could be anything. Just anything I enjoy. And that little corner of my life, it's not about Krishna. And so we reserve these little spaces in our life that are kind of like Krishna-free spaces. And those are the sense gratification areas. It can be a relationship. Like this is sort of a Krishna-free relationship. Because in that relationship, I get to be the center of it. Or it's sort of like partners in crime, like me and the other person agree that we can both be the center of the relationship. And so, wherever we have attachment, and there's like millions of different kinds of attachments, but wherever we have attachment, we create a little Krishna-free zone where we can be the enjoyer. And it's natural. We're conditioned souls. I mean, it's just where that's where you start when you start to practice bhakti yoga. And so the challenge of Krishna consciousness is, can I put Krishna in the center of every aspect of my life? Can I always remember Krishna so that Krishna becomes the center of every aspect of my life? I used to give this example when I was young, and that, when I was young, when people always had parties, that was like the big thing, you go to parties. And if let's say if a guy had a girlfriend, or a girl had a boyfriend, and let's say you were invited to a party, but your partner wasn't invited, I mean, obviously you don't go. Or you tell them, like, this is, if Sally Mae is not welcome, then I'm not going, or something. Or Billy Joe. And so, where's this coming from? Anyway, so, I mean, that's what love is. Love is that if you are with someone, if someone is your partner, and that person is not invited, you don't leave them at home. And so when you love Krishna, of course, also we also have the prerogative of transcendental sneakiness. Like someone may invite us somewhere, and they're not really interested in Krishna. We can go there and, in some way, like drop some prasadam in the lemonade or something. So, I mean, Prabhupada was so interesting and amazing because he actually did put Krishna in everything. I mean, he really did see Krishna everywhere. And so it's a gradual process, but so here we are. We are members of a community. We have this wonderful Krishna West team in London. I won't say who began the program because the beginner of the program doesn't want me to say that, but actually, so we have this really nice Krishna West program in London, and so we're a community, and then we're part of a society, the International Society for Overeating. I'm sorry, the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. So, and so it's interesting how, even though Bhakti Yoga is like a team sport, we work together, but we have our private lives. We're a balance. We're public and private. We're social but we're individual and private. We engage in activities together, like talking about Krishna or chanting at the same time. We have our own private relationship with Krishna, our own prayers, our own secrets in life about our struggles or our our hopes or whatever. And so we participate in communities and societies, and that's necessary because it's who we are in one sense. I mean, all of us are. That's why we can use language. The reason we can use language, the reason we're not just like little, bestial children in a forest somewhere, it's because we grew up in society. That's why we're civilized. That's why we can. So we are by nature. I mean, we're social by nature, and yet we're also individual and private by nature. And so it's like that balance. So to belong to a spiritual community and society, which we must do, otherwise we can't practice spiritual life, yet at the same time to remain very strong in terms of our individual relationship with Krishna and our individual purpose to go back to Godhead. It's very interesting. Just take a step back and look at all of this, like who we are and what we're actually doing. And to look at the big picture, which is that there is a spiritual world. In fact, spiritual world's everywhere. Prabhupada used to give the example of the prison. There's a prison, but the prison is within the state. It's part of the society. It's not outside the country or outside the state or outside the city. And so, in that sense, even though we're thrashing around here in the Mahatattva, actually, at the same time, we are in the spiritual world because the material. It's not like there's a spiritual world and then there's a material world. There's actually only a spiritual world. The spiritual world is the real world, and in the real world, some people like us who kind of took a wrong turn at the Viraja River. We are up the Viraja River without a paddle, right? So we are just in this, you could say, this facility. That's kind of the polite word. We're in this facility called the material universe, in which we're, learning how to be normal again. So Krishna is so kind. I mean, Krishna, when souls reject him, he doesn't just throw them into a lake of fire, which could ruin your whole day, falling into a lake of fire. And so Krishna is so kind. He creates all these universes for us, and it's really interesting. It's like to make it a real facility. where you really get to see what's what. He actually even makes this world a reflection of his own world. I mean, you think about it, like, imagine, let's say, an apple tree reflected in clear water. On the one hand, it's just a reflection. But on the other hand, it looks exactly like an apple tree. Like when you see your image in a mirror, okay, that image in the mirror is not you, but it looks exactly like you. And so if you think about reflections, they're not real, but they're terribly real. Or they're very real. And so in that sense, the reason it feels so natural in this world to fall in love or to take a walk in beautiful nature or whatever, the reason it feels like that's what I'm supposed to be doing is because it is what you're supposed to be doing. It's just that we are sort of trapped in the reflection. But again, if you look at the reflection of an apple tree, that's exactly what an apple tree looks like. And so the idea of being in a world where there are attractive males and females and they have relationships or people, that's actually real. It's eternal. It's just that we're looking at the reflection. It's like you're hungry, you're trying to eat a reflected apple. And very few calories, no carbs. So all we have to do is just look up. There is, as soon as I found out that the spiritual world is just an eternal, pure version of my middle school parties, I thought, I'm going there. Because, I don't know if they have the potato chips and onion dip, but probably something a little more sattvic. But it's, there's something perfect about young men and women falling in love with each other. There's actually something perfect about it. We just have to do it in the real world and not in the reflection. Because that actually is what Krishna eternally manifests for his own pleasure and for the pleasure of souls. In the spiritual world, Krishna, of course, Radha and Krishna, the gopis, but people, like souls, have affinities. There are, like Yashoda and Nanda. We presume they like each other. Hi, my name's Nanda. Hi, I'm Yashoda. Yeah, we're not really going to, we don't really have anything to do with each other, but we're going to, okay, I'm going to be the mother. Oh, yeah, and I'm going to be the father. Okay, let's cooperate on this. And it's really just about Krishna. No, if Nanda and Yashoda, or Vasudeva and Devaki, it's actually kind of romantic, isn't it? People in this world, people like, at least in Asian cultures, have this romantic idea of a couple, life after life. They're a couple. Yes, we were in love in our past life. Everyone likes that kind of stuff. And then you have these cases of Krishna's parents who were a couple and presumably a loving couple. And life after life, they actually stayed together for many lives. And then they got Krishna as their child. And so the spiritual world is very romantic. It's not, people are not trying to enjoy. They're civilized. They're not like barbarians, like me Tarzan, you Jane. It's not that stuff. And then little baby cheetah. Because after all, how could the spiritual world be boring compared to this world? Like in this world you can fall in love, in this world there's all kinds of beautiful places, in the spiritual world it's just kind of like this, I don't know, kind of like nothing's really happening, but it's extremely pious. And everyone just kind of sits up in like this Vaikuntha stadium applauding Radha and Krishna's loving affairs. It's a fact that Radha and Krishna are infinitely attractive. They're infinitely attractive, and it's, think when you go to a movie, like you go to a romantic movie, you're crying and crying at this romantic movie. And, technically it's not you, it's someone else. It's some beautiful actress and some handsome actor. And yet people get into it. It's interesting because think about this. People love this stuff. I mean, the whole entertainment industry, people go to these movies and these romantic movies. You love to see beautiful people falling in love with each other. And even though you're just sitting there, it's not really you, but you enjoy it. You enjoy it. There's like a real happiness that comes from it. It's like cathartic, you can cry and laugh and just be inspired. And oh my God, I hope they get together. And so even in the material world, it's like that, where people are self-centered. So in the spiritual world, seeing Radha and Krishna, everyone is relishing that love, and people have also their friends and their couples in the spiritual world, boyfriends and girlfriends, and people live in beautiful places. It's like a real world. It's not just sort of this infinitely gigantic Indian poster. It's just it's actually it's a real world with real people. They're the real people. We think we're real people, and they're kind of like these wonderful beings that live in Indian posters. But actually, they're the real people. They are the real people. They have the real relationships. And so here we are, forming communities and societies and trying to preach, but ultimately, as a community, as a team, trying to work together, encourage each other, ultimately to love Krishna. Ultimately trying to encourage each other to love Krishna. And what about the fallen souls? We see in Prabhupada's case, it's precisely because Prabhupada did and does love Krishna that he was relentless. He kept trying this and trying that until he found something that worked. And so when you love Krishna, you want to please him. And if you see there's all these, and when you look at all the, the fruitives and the vikarmis and the mental speculators and other despicable community, I'm just kidding. But we look at all the non-devotees. Can't laugh, we'll cough. But we look at all the time out. They're all devotees. They're only devotees. Ultimately, there are no non-devotees. They're just devotees that forgot. It's like if you, let's say someone in your family, be a brother or sister, and let's say they're sick and they're feverish or delirious, and so they can't remember anything. But you still see them as your family. It's not that if someone in your family is sick and delirious, throw the bum out. They're not responding. They're not acting like a family member. No, you work with them until they get healthy again. So ultimately, and that's the Paramahansa vision. There are words even in the Shastras like bhakta, abhakta, devotee, non-devotee. So, there are categories and words for the categories that we have to use in order to describe what's going on in the world. But ultimately, everyone is a devotee. There are only devotees that remember and those that forget. And they're all part of the same family. There's only one family in the universe. There's ultimately only one family in the universe. And so when we see it, when we actually see this, it's you'll be very happy. When you really see Krishna consciousness, Krishna in my Gita guide, now available wherever better spiritual books are sold. But in my Gita guide, I actually have one section where I show how Krishna repeatedly talks about knowledge as seeing, that you see the truth. It's not just that famous verse, Upadekshanti te jnanam jnaninas tattvadarshina, pandita samadarshana. Krishna constantly speaks about seeing the truth, seeing knowledge. To know is to see it. And this is real happiness. Real happiness is to see Krishna everywhere, to see Krishna consciousness, not to just manipulate the material world in a way so it gratifies you. That is like, that is so frustrating. Because as soon as you get the material world in focus, like 3 seconds later, it's out of focus. So, if we just see Krishna everywhere, we'll always be happy. And the material stuff takes care of itself. It's interesting, we actually end up enjoying the material world more than if we weren't Krishna conscious. It's very interesting. Because Krishna's goal is that you work through all your desires. Krishna is he's very smart. He's not a religious fanatic. And he knows that you can't go back to the spiritual world unless you've worked through your desires. And so the more you surrender to Krishna, ironically, the more you surrender to Krishna, the safer it becomes for Krishna to give you things you desire, so that you can experience that, okay, I've experienced it, and now I know that's not really ultimately what I want. And so, if you surrender to Krishna, he has a program for you, and that program includes working through all your material desires. Surrender to Krishna doesn't mean that, God's a religious fanatic. He means well, but he just doesn't really understand what it means to be human. And so if I surrender to Krishna, he's going to just give me some super spiritual thing, and meanwhile I'll go crazy because I have these desires. Krishna's not actually that stupid. And when you surrender to Krishna, all it means is that you trust that he knows what he's doing. That's all it means. Surrender to Krishna doesn't mean go and move into your local Hare Krishna temple. It doesn't mean that you somehow or other ignore all your own needs and desires. That's not what it means to surrender to Krishna. Surrender to Krishna only means one thing. It means that you believe that Krishna knows what he's doing. Krishna knows very well what your desires are. He knows very well all the little, whatever little nasty stuff is still in there. Krishna knows it all very, very well. He has to live with it every day because he's in your heart. So he knows all about it. And the idea is that if you surrender to Krishna, he comes up with this perfect program so that you're satisfied. You're satisfied. And so you will actually have a better material life if you surrender to Krishna than if you try to enjoy the material world. That's kind of like the cruel irony of not being a good devotee. If you really trust Krishna and just try to serve him, you'll actually have a much better material life. And your desires will be fulfilled, and you'll, all the curiosity you have about different exotic forms of sense gratification, and then you'll go back to Godhead. But let Krishna do it. Krishna will do it in a way, Krishna will walk you through all this stuff in a way that you don't become degraded. Whereas we try to enjoy ourselves, then there is danger. Krishna has a way of showing you what the world is, of letting you experience things so that at the end you're satisfied, okay, I've seen it, but you're not degraded. He's really good at this. Really good at this. And so that's what faith in Krishna means. You believe that if I give myself to Krishna, he will come up with a perfect plan for my life so that I won't be frustrated, I won't go crazy, I'll actually experience everything I need to experience, and I'll go back to Krishna. And so that's why we should just stick to Krishna. Because, it's absurd to think that anyone, including yourself, can do a better job. Like, that's okay, Krishna, appreciate the thought, but I can handle this. It's really idiotic to think that you can do better for yourself than Krishna can do for you. And so, yes?
Well, we could say, but in the beginning, Prabhupada would emphasize, like for initiation vows, okay, now you're going to let's say, okay, now we have principles to follow or
Yes.
whatever. So how does that integrate with?
Well, first of all, Prabhupada was responding to information he was receiving. For example, in the beginning, devotees were saying, "Oh, Prabhupada, I just want to surrender to you. I'll do whatever you say." So Prabhupada said, "Okay." So he started arranging marriages, and then people took vows, and then there was like this epidemic of divorces. And I remember I was a temple president. I was a Gurhasta, the true vowel R, by the way, Gurhasta. I was a Gurhasta temple president, and I remember when the letter came, because in those days there was no internet, there was no anything. You just get a letter in the mail. Everything was by letters. Prabhupada saying, "That's it. I'm not doing marriages anymore. Forget it. I've had it. I'm out of here." So Prabhupada himself was, constantly learning, not about Krishna. He already knew Krishna, but about just the way the world is. So, and Prabhupada said, don't be so anxious to get people to move into the temples. I mean, we were young and immature, and everyone has to live. If you don't live inside a Hare Krishna temple, you're basically not necessarily a demon, but something between a devotee and a demon. If you don't physically live in a temple, and so, I mean, you, my God, you were.
That was the weird one.
I know Brahmatirtha had this, really, really bad luck that he was actually a mature adult when he joined the movement, which made him almost like, really didn't fit in the Hare Krishna movement.
I told you the story when Prabhupada gave me the hug.
Was that?
I was like 7.
Oh, perfect questions, perfect answers. That's Brahmatirtha.
Yes.
It was like 1974 in New York, and devotees in their infinite compassion, not all, just some, had convinced me I really was very fallen because I wasn't initiated yet. But for whatever reason, I was taking my time for things. And so I thought, well, when Prabhupada walks from his quarters down the hallway, then into the temple room, I was in the hallway, I don't want him to see me.
Because you're so fallen.
Yeah. So as soon as they said Prabhupada's coming, I offered obeisances, and I said the prayers as slow as one could say it, and by the time I would stand up, he would be in the temple room, and mission accomplished. Except somehow Prabhupada saw me. Not sure how he saw me. When you're offering obeisance, we all look alike. But anyway, he saw me, and he waited till I was done, and waited. And then when I stood up, he did something a little unusual. He gave me a hug and said, "Good to see you," which was in sort of a very deep affirmation to me that I was taking the correct path to Krishna. But it was an unusual and deep affirmation.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. When I asked Prabhupada for sannyas, he actually slapped me on the back.
What did he say?
He said to his secretary, put his name on the list. Because he was giving sannyas to a few other devotees. Yeah, so we have to revive that, well, not revive, I mean, you already have it, but just we have to keep that spirit of just making Krishna everything. Really making the Krishna the center of our lives, trusting him. Prabhupada used to always say that he had, of course, he had 5 children, one of whom he lost, was mentally impaired and just walked away one day and never came back. No one knew where he went. But and he said that I took sannyas, I gave up my children, but now Krishna sent me thousands of children who actually are doing so much more for me than my other children. So that's what, basically we work together as a community to encourage each other to surrender to Krishna, to encourage each other to love Krishna and to trust Krishna. So, it's Vyasa-Puja day. So, well, now that I've glorified myself.
Jai Charadev.
Ready to get your check?
There.
Oh. Better than a PayPal receipt. better than a check, right? 'Cause it's already in my account. I gotta be careful of all these jokes. You know, are you filming?
I'm recording.
Oh. Evam Seta Dijuta Nam Bhajita. No. What is that verse said? Machita Madgata Prana. Those who are thinking of me, whose lives are dedicated to me, Bodhiyantak Parasparam, enlightening one another, teaching one another, Katayantas Chamang Nityang, always talking about me, Susanti Charamanti Cha, to always find satisfaction and pleasure. So just to be with other servants of Krishna, just to talk about Krishna is real happiness. That actually is real happiness. Any questions?
Stayed with me what Tirtha was saying with Prabhupada, just this image of how human he was.
Oh my God, yes! We have to get back to the real Prabhupada. He was funny, he was personal, he was a real person. He was a real person, he wasn't just this thing up there. He was a real person, he would joke with us and care about us, and he gave his life for us, just traveling around. Yeah, the real Prabhupada is much more interesting and attractive than the icon. You read about it in those books. I mean, Shyamal Sundar now published a book, Hunting Rhinos with the Swami or something, and then of course Mukunda's book is really good, excellent. Guru Das. There's so many nice books. That's why I personally am fascinated by ISKCON back in those earlier days, because the relationship with Prabhupada is so much more personal. It's like Krishna's Vrindavan Leela or Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's Navadvip Leela, same thing. And similarly, Prabhupada's Vrindavan Leela, you could say, in terms of his relationship with his disciples, was in the earlier days of the movement, where everyone knew Prabhupada and he knew everyone. It was very personal, it wasn't mythological. You know, everyone understood Prabhupada's a pure devotee that came from Krishna, but there was a real relationship. Like you see his famous picture where Mukunda's wife, Janaki, was sister of Jamuna. The Prabhupada was in the New York airport and he's flying to the West Coast, I think, and so she stole his ticket. I mean, in terms of the role of women, it was to just play with Prabhupada. And there's a picture where Prabhupada's laughing. She's standing over him, he's sitting there in the airport lounge, and she's saying over him the ticket, saying like, you can't go. She's holding his ticket, and he's just laughing. It was like a family. And we did not use the word Mataji then. I remember when I joined the temple in Berkeley in 1969, and must have been like maybe 9 or 10 men, 9 or 10 women, we were all young. And it was just like brothers and sisters. You know, the women weren't Maya, and the men, it was just like brothers and sisters. We really enjoyed each other's company. We did everything together. There were no fall downs. No one raped anyone. No one fell down. No one snuck up in the attic or something. So there was actually no fall. I mean, there was nothing even remotely like a fall down. And yet the men and women were just all like brothers and sisters, and we really enjoyed each other's company. We talked, we joked. It was a family. It's just like a spiritual family. That's the movement I joined.
Mm-hmm.
That's the Hare Krishna movement that I joined. It's very simple. I asked Temple President whether I should stay in college or drop out, and he said, I don't know, ask the regional secretary. That was Tamal Krishna. Tamal said, I don't know, ask Prabhupada. So it was just like that. So I wrote a letter to Prabhupada. Wait, what were you? This is starting to look very suspicious.
Vrindavan Maha.
Oh, thank you. Oh, yeah, we'll give this out at the end. We'll give this out. Thank you. So, I've told you this before, haven't I? I mean, to me, those earlier days, like 67, 68, 69, to me, that's the golden age of ISKCON in the West. Because just to compare it, you've heard me talk about this. I mean, just to compare it very quickly, like what it was then and then soon after that. And at that time, it's like Brahmacharya knew Prabhupada. You know, everyone knew Prabhupada, and Prabhupada knew everyone. Of course, even later he knew Prabhupada because he had a special relationship with Prabhupada. And then the movement grew so fast that within a few years, a very tiny percentage of ISKCON devotees had ever had a personal conversation with Prabhupada.
And around that time, the first wave of devotees started coming back from India. And they started saying, well, we need some culture. And they grabbed onto northern Indian culture.
Actually, there's several things. It was like the perfect storm of... There was that. That started in 1970. And...
What started in 1970?
Well, that's when Prabhupada first took everyone back to India, or took a lot of devotees back to Indians. And Prabhupada would instruct them, because in India, unless you do certain things or a certain way, you know, people won't listen to you, at least back then, because India was still very conservative. And so those devotees were writing to the devotees in the West saying, you don't know what you're supposed to do, you know, we're really supposed to do this, and we're supposed to do that. And the Indianization of the Hare Krishna movement really began in a way that it hadn't existed before. Something else happened, 1972, 71, 72, all these young devotees took sannyas who were, immature, to kind of be generous. And so you get this very heavy preaching, and the movement grows so fast. And so 3 relationships deteriorated as a historian when I look at it. Number 1, in a sense, the relationship with Prabhupada became much more remote. I mean, some devotees knew Prabhupada, Brahmacharya knew Prabhupada, but increasingly, you know, a very, very strong majority of all the devotees in ISKCON didn't really know Prabhupada personally.
Very small percentage.
Yeah, never had a personal conversation with him. And so the relationship with Prabhupada starts to become remote. And it's interesting because if you look at the founders of religions, whether it's Jesus or Buddha, like that, you know, they didn't fly in planes. And so it's only when they passed away or passed on that you get this mythologizing that begins when the charismatic leader. But with Prabhupada, in a sense, you start to get this psychological effect where you lose your charismatic founder, or the charismatic founder is just not available to you anymore, even when Prabhupada was still living, because he could fly all over the world. So it's really, all these well-known effects of what happens when a charismatic leader passes away, they begin when Prabhupada's still on the planet, because he's flying around the world and people don't see him very much. And so then the relationship between devotees, the position of women deteriorated. When I joined the movement, they used to call women gopis, which is, you know, kind of whatever, but, you know, the girls were the gopis, and then as things degraded, they became, you know, the cows, and they became the witches, and it's, you know, it just became very crazy. But when I joined the movement, men and women, you can look at pictures in Back to Godhead. In 1970, when I was in Boston, they did this big cover story in Back to Godhead about the Boston Hare Krishna temple. It's funny, you know, those pictures were in the Sankirtan van, you know, the Romapad and myself and Giriraj Swami, and we're all in the, you know, the Brahmacharis in the Sankirtan van. And in the Sankirtan van, it was just boys and girls. I mean, they didn't have the boys' side of the van, the girls' side of the van. We were just like all in the Sankirtan van. And everyone's happy, and it was just really like a spiritual family. So the relationship with Prabhupada becomes remote and becomes in some ways mythologized. Whereas if you read all those books, say like Mukunda Goswami, Guru Das, now Shama Sundar, these really fascinating books, you see that Prabhupada is the pure devotee, he's the spiritual master, but as far as material strategy, Prabhupada kind of sets boundaries, but apart from that, the devotees figure out what to do. They figure out what to do. They're creative. So, for example, why did they go to the Lower East Side? Because devotees said that's where we should be. Why did they decide to open a temple in San Francisco? Because the devotees told Prabhupada that's where it's happening now. And so, in all these different things, it's devotees telling Prabhupada. You see Prabhupada's leading disciples walking with him. They're wearing Western clothes. Leading disciples. And so the relationship between devotees, ISKCON became much more hierarchical. Because as the movement grew, and people started having more power. So if you were a temple president, you had all this power, and Prabhupada was remote. So you don't have the example of Prabhupada, okay, he's Prabhupada, at the same time he's very personal, and it's like a family. And so the model of authority hierarchy becomes that the power, whoever has power is more remote, and is, you can't really talk to that person, you can't question anything that person says. Whereas earlier, if Prabhupada said something, people always say, well, what does that mean? Or what about this or that? And if it's about some material thing, they'd say, well, Prabhupada, I think it's better to do it that way. And, they'd talk about it. But when Prabhupada's very remote, and you don't see him very much, and so that kind of remote, untouchable, beyond you authority figure, it starts to trickle down. So you get temple presidents where, just shut up and do what I say.
And even then you had a couple of waves of senior people saying Prabhupada's God.
Well, that was, although that never really caught on. It'd be interesting to see, is that related to what I'm saying? I haven't actually thought about it, but that was just kind of like flared up, and then they were kicked out of ISKCON immediately. But the concept of authority becomes much more hierarchical. And so the relationship between devotees, in my view, deteriorated. The role of women in ISKCON deteriorated. The third relationship that suffered, the first one being, I think, the relationship with Prabhupada, started, in some people's minds became, if you compare it, what it became, and compare it to what it was by reading these great biographies of Prabhupada, it definitely became more remote and almost mythological. And then and the relationship between devotees and the non-devotees. Because you have this book distribution revolution, and they're just kind of like, walking book points and Lakshmi points. And whereas in the late 60s, we were really part of the scene. We were part of the youth scene. We were very much part of everything. And then you get this situation where we just basically just burn it to a crisp. Going out there, just getting as much money as we can, selling as many books as we can, and people start to look at us in a very different way. So in many different ways, you can say, well, the Hare Krishna explosion, that was the golden age. And it was certainly very important. It was a very important, powerful moment, and I'm not in any way criticizing. I'm just saying, though, that just like in Krishna Leela, if you look at Krishna in Vrindavan, in terms of geopolitical influence, he's doing much less. Krishna as a powerful world leader who just changes power relationships on earth, he does it out of Vrindavan. And yet if you want to know who Krishna really, really is, you look at Krishna in Vrindavan. And so what I'm saying is those early days of the movement, maybe 67, 66, 67, 68, 69, even a little bit up into 70, that's the Vrindavan Prabhupada. That's the intimate, real Prabhupada. And then you start to get sort of like the Narayan Prabhupada. The Prabhupada is just the commander, and few people really know him that well. And so to me, in my own inspiration to do what I can to help the Western mission, that when Prabhupada was really centered in the West, he was really centered in the West. It's interesting because if you listen to Prabhupada's lectures in 1966 in New York, he had that little apartment, 26 Second Avenue. It wasn't like the Ritz, as they say. And so Prabhupada was saying that, okay, you live here in New York. Actually, my home is Vrindavan. So Prabhupada is talking about, I live in Vrindavan. I'm just visiting your country. But then, by the end of 69, and sort of the turn of the year, end of 69, early 70, when they buy the first real serious ISKCON property in Watsika in L.A., and then Prabhupada changes, because instead of saying, I live in Vrindavan, I'm just visiting your country, says, okay, I'm going to live in LA. He really liked the weather in LA. It's funny, if you look at Database, type in LA, Los Angeles, one of the main things Prabhupada says is how much he likes the weather. But anyway, and then Prabhupada starts talking about, this is my headquarters, I'm just going to stay in LA, I live here. And so you get this period where Prabhupada sees himself as living in America. He sees the movement as a Western movement. And doesn't really have the intention of going back to India. In fact, there's a famous story that when all those things happened with the four sannyasis, and they were plotting with the Gaudiya Math against Prabhupada to usurp his movement, and Prabhupada was heartbroken and decides to go back to India, sort of home court advantage, because he felt he needed to be in India where he could really defend himself. And there's even a story, it's in the Lilamrita, it's actually in the Prabhupada Lilamrita, where he goes in front of the deities, Rukmini, Dwarkadish, or Krishna, in LA, and says, why are you taking me back to India? Because it was just a place of frustration. It was a place where no one took him seriously. And then he came to the West, had this huge movement. So, of course, when he did go back to India, everything exploded. It was just amazing. But still, to me, the rasa, if you want to put it that way, the taste, the inspiration for what a Western Hare Krishna movement could be, to me, I find that inspiration looking at a time when Prabhupada lived in the West. And he himself saw his movement as a Western movement. And he put it in his pranam mantra, Pasyati Deshatarni. I mean, obviously, Krishna wanted to revive all this in India. And I was just in India, and it's just amazing. There's so many nice devotees and so many projects. It's really, it's a great movement in many ways. We can always do better, but still the movement is just, I was very impressed by what I saw there in terms of the quality of the devotees, the programs they have. And that was Krishna's plan. He wanted to get this going back in India, but meanwhile, back in the West, I think we really, I don't know, that's my inspiration back then, in terms of the relationship Prabhupada had with the devotees and the kinds of relationships I think we should have among ourselves. And say relationship among devotees, between gurus and disciples, the relationship with the public. My inspiration comes not from the later period, but rapid expansion. Because in a sense, there's all this super expansion, so many devotees, but then many of them left. Or many of them are not really active now. And so I like to get back to that. That's, to me, like Prabhupada and Vrindavan, in the sense of, the Vrindavan Prabhupada, that really ecstatic, intimate relationship with his disciples, where Prabhupada is very much a real person. Just a real person. It's not that when you become a pure devotee, like let's say down here, regular people, regular devotees, we talk and laugh, we have friendships, but when you become a pure devotee, you kind of get frozen into this iconic state, and you just everything you do is inconceivable and mysterious, and it's actually exactly the opposite. It's exactly the opposite. The more advanced you become in Krishna consciousness, the more personal you become. And the more you care about other people, and the more you're just like a real person, because that's the soul. When all the false ego is purified and it's not just, then you just become a real person. You become more and more personal, more and more loving, and more and more respectful of other people. Because the qualification to be a pure devotee is that you see everyone as equal to you. You see everyone as part of Krishna. You see everyone as a pure soul. So if I think I'm better than other people, to that extent, I'm not really qualified. Of course, a disciple thinks, the guru is far above me, but what makes the guru superior is that he doesn't think he's better than other people. Because in this world, everyone's kind of proud, everyone kind of wants to. So, yeah, that period from maybe 66 to 70. To me, that's the. I just love that period of ISKCON history, and I remember it. And even the prashadam we cooked. I mean, you could say it was kind of Indian. We did chutneys or chapatis or something, but it was really kind of. It's like when I went back to Italy to be co-GBC of Italy in the 80s, and what I discovered there is what I really loved was not Italian food; it was New York Italian.
Yes.
Because it's like the pizza and lasagna that's kind of like all over the world. It's actually New York Italian.
It's very common to say so.
Yeah. So, what was I going to say? Oh, so the prasadam we had, it was, you could say Indian, because there was chutneys and dal and everything, but it was really kind of like our Western, like New York Italian. It was kind of like Western Indian prasadam, and it was just different. The drum beats were different, and it was just very much our movement, because none of us had ever been to India. None of us had even ever been to India, and so it really had this Western flavor to it. And of course, back in the late 60s, early 70s, there was a big fad, so all the young people were freaky and everything, so we were freaky, but we fit in because everybody's freaky.
Like on Halloween?
Yeah, sort of like 365 days a year was Halloween back then. So, but that's just it's just such a beautiful time in ISKCON history. And there were problems, it wasn't perfect. So yeah, the real problem, this got started, I think, didn't you say something?
Oh yeah, I said it. I was just that struck me how personal he was.
Yeah, completely. And one time I said, because in those days, I've often told the story, we didn't really sell books, just all Harinam all day, and so I played the drum, like kind of like that meant you were a leader, you play the drum and lead the kirtan. And so I play the drum a lot and lead the kirtan, so I had tape on my fingers, because you're playing the drum. And so one time Prabhupada walked by me and he stopped and he was really concerned that I taped my fingers, like, what's wrong? I mean, he would joke. It's funny, I was so serious and all of Prabhupada, it's only years later I thought back and realized he was always joking with me. It's like Prabhupada was always inviting me, come on, just be a normal, just like, let's just talk. But I was trying to, he was far above me, but one time I walked into Prabhupada's room, I told the story, I was very serious. So Prabhupada kind of mocked my seriousness. I went into Prabhupada's room and said, Jai Prabhupada, and Prabhupada said, yes, what is your message? I remember that, and then he gave me a flower. Here, take this flower. One time I went into Prabhupada's room and it's just like, for example, if you're a parent, you have a child, and at first it's just kind of like this cute little human eggplant, but then as the child grows and becomes more of a person, and that happens after 1 year, after 2 years, even after a few months, you see this miraculous process where this creature is just becoming human, developing a personality, and for the parents, it's the greatest joy as a child grows and can more and more have a real relationship with the parents. You know what I mean? If you're a mother or father, as your child begins to recognize you as the mother or the father, and to know you and can actually talk to you, and rather than just sort of lie there and in a very, very cute way defecate and eat and scream and other very endearing activities. So, but as a child becomes a person more and more and starts to actually have a loving relationship with the parents, that's the happiness for the parents. And so in the same way, Prabhupada was always inviting us into a more personal relationship, to really, a real personal relationship. So it must be getting late. What time is it?
Almost 10.
Oh my God, I've been
10?
worried.
Yes.
You guys have to go have to London. So any last question?
Yeah, I always have questions, but I think we don't have time. I think.
One more, this last one.
I don't know which one to choose.
Wow.
No, one thing that came to mind was just, did you ever, because you said that you always look Prabhupada like, from, like, as a superior, and I wonder, did you ever step into that relationship then when you sort of...
As I got older, as I grew into... Yeah, it's natural as you grow, as a child, every year, your relationship with your parents becomes more and more personal. So yes, definitely. And Prabhupada was happy. I went to be a secretary in February, I think, of '76, the month before the Mayapur festival. Prabhupada just liked me to hang out in his room. He just like, if I wasn't there, he'd send for me. He just liked to talk to me and just wanted me to be there. So that was really nice. That was in '76. That was really. And it was before the festivals. There weren't many devotees around, so I just got to spend a month in Prabhupada. He's a pure devotee, always thinking of Krishna, but he's a real person.
You often say that Prabhupada had a lot of discussions with you, but you only give us like a few anecdotes, and if you had like, for example, a whole month.
Where's the thing to suck on? Where do we put that?
What?
Lozenges to suck on
Like,
in the windows?
yeah.
You probably feel like you could probably write a book of anecdotes just for that 1 month. Wish you could give us more of those.
These? No.
No.
We have some other.
No, but I can suck on this. That's all right. That's right. So, yeah, I will, but now it's almost 10 o'clock, but... To me, it's not just anecdotes, it was just... it was, and I do have anecdotes, but... Just being with Prabhupada, that's right. Just observing a pure devotee, someone who is very personal, very real, and really cares about everyone around him. And yet, it's one and different. Prabhupada's not a different kind of entity. He's like us. He's just pure. He's one of us, but he's pure. We are not there yet, but he is pure. And he was, for example, before he came to the West in Vrindavan, he used to ride a bike around town. He was like a real person. He used to give candy to the kids. He was the really nice sadhu who would give them candies. They'd all come to us. He's really, I think it's important to really, to develop our love for Prabhupada. We understand that he's like us. He just happens to be pure. But he's a soul like us. He's just a pure soul. So, if you come tomorrow, maybe we'll do more of your questions.
Yeah.
So, you all understand that, right? I was lucky. I just got the tail end of the real personal time. Because when I joined, all the older devotees, when I joined the movement, if someone had been in the movement 3 years, they were like, oh my God, you must have a spiritual body by now. But when I joined, there were so many devotees all around that had spent so much time with Prabhupada. Yeah. But anyway, that's just thinking about it now. So attractive, and to love Prabhupada as a real person, not just as a some frozen icon. There's a real person that really cares about you and is funny and fun to be with. But he's pure. He's free of material desires, has pure love for Krishna, is in touch with Krishna, but apart from that, it's just like us. in a sense, to me, that's so inspiring because that's what helps me to understand that I could be like that. Because in ISKCON, it's almost like, in ISKCON jargon, like, becoming pure, becoming advanced is always something that you'll do in some future lifetime. Or, I know that I'm really fallen disgusting and repulsive now, but it's just like, when you realize that Prabhupada is like us, he's a soul, he's a jiva soul. He's actually one of us, and yet he's a pure devotee of Krishna. He has pure love for Krishna, and yet he's one of us. And it makes you realize, hey, so, we can become pure devotees because someone who's in the same category as us, jiva, is a pure devotee. And so I think one of the unfortunate things about mythologizing Prabhupada and putting him just so far away from us is that you lose that wonderful inspiration that comes when you realize here's a person like me that is a pure devotee of Krishna. And so I could become a pure devotee if I really dedicate myself. So if you have this idea that Prabhupada is sort of a different kind of entity, his purity doesn't really say much for your possibilities because you're a different kind of thing. You know what I mean? But again, Prabhupada's one of us, but he's one of us who's completely pure. But he's a real person like us. Jokes. When I was Prabhupada's secretary in India, he used to tell me jokes. Indian jokes are really funny. We'd go on walks together, and he'd tell me, But he was, he really enjoyed it. It's like any loving father. He just liked to be with the kids. He enjoyed being with his disciples. He really enjoyed just having a friendly relationship with them. And of course, we understood the etiquette. So it's safe to have an intimate, friendly relationship with Prabhupada if you just remember the etiquette. So that Prabhupada is so far away and so distant and just literally a different kind of entity. It's not the truth. It's not the real Prabhupada. The Prabhupada is materially omniscient. Like, no matter how many times he said that's crazy, of course I'm not materially omniscient, I'm not God. So if Prabhupada ever said anything about any material subject, that's it. Whereas when Prabhupada was here, it wasn't it. As the devotees would say, like Prabhupada at one point started citing the Aquarian Gospel as Jesus, was in India. And then someone told him, Prabhupada, that was written about 100 years ago. Or less. Back then it was that was written 60 years ago. He said, okay, we don't talk about that anymore. He was just like a preacher out there, he's like, give me ammunition. Okay, here's something you can say, Prabhupada. No, we can't say it anymore. He was just like, and they were like, Prabhupada's a real person, just working with the devotees. It was like a cooperative relationship. Anyway, you understand, right? Okay. So, Yadavi?
Yep.
I guess your team has... Oh, Vrindavan Sweets. Anyone dare to try one of these? Here, why don't you give them out?
You want to give up?
Oh, from my own lotus light.
They can go from good ones.
Thank you. Only 3 calories per sweet. Get them while they last.
Thank you.
Oh, that's right. You can eat inconceivable quantities, right?
Yeah. I get another one for that.
she wants one, I have this small one.
Thank you.
And this.
You know, it's interesting because just I've said this before, but if you put Prabhupada way out there, where he's not really like right here with us, right in the middle of us, because he's way up there, and then I think that's directly connected to a style of management where the leader is just like, I'm way up there, don't even think about challenging what I say. And because it is, you see it in Catholic countries. If you look at how the kinds of governments that developed in Catholic countries and the kind of governments that developed in Protestant countries in Europe, you find that in Catholic countries you have much heavier governments. Like in Spain, France. Italy's different. Italy's like its own category, the city-states and everything. But whereas in England, you had a lot more rights and different. It's just a whole different, and then even reflected in colonial styles and the fact that England created several of the most important first world countries in the world, and the other three major colonial powers that were all Catholic, France, Portugal, and Spain. Between all of them, couldn't create one first world country. We were talking about that earlier, but it's so I think that when you put Prabhupada almost like beyond anything you can really personally have intimately, then and then people in other positions of authority kind of take on those characteristics. Like Prabhupada is beyond everything, you can't talk about him, and then I'm also, you can't really challenge anything I'm doing. So some people have a vested interest in keeping Prabhupada way up there because it leaves room for them to be up there too. It's interesting.
You think consciously?
What?
Or they-
I think they do many things unconsciously. Well, we can analyze. Okay, we'd like to thank all of you. Yadavi. Here, take this girl and team leader. See if I can throw it on you. It's like I win like a stuffed teddy bear if I get this on her. No, I'm just kidding. Her.